I am 67 years old, and I was naive enough to believe I had already encountered every shade of heartbreak life had to offer. I thought I had paid my dues, that the universe had wrung all the sorrow it could from my soul. I was so terribly wrong. The worst, it turns out, had been saved for last. Mother's Day began in the same way as every other Sunday. I woke up to the profound and unyielding silence of my empty house, a home that once echoed with life, but now felt like a hollow cathedral to memory. I made coffee for one, the ritual a bitter reminder of the man who was no longer there to share the morning with me. It has been 3 years since Arthur passed, yet the quiet he left behind had only recently begun to feel less like peace and more like a punishment. It used to be a comforting blanket, but lately the silence had sharpened, its edges reminding me of every conversation we would never have again, every shared laugh that had faded into the stillness. My daughter Clara had called the night before. Her voice was thin and formal, stripped of the warmth that once defined it. "Mom, we're having brunch at Marcus's mother's house tomorrow. You should come. 1 o'clock sharp. You should come." The words landed like a duty, an obligation. It was not, "We would love to have you," or "Please join us." "Mom, it wouldn't be the same without you." It was simply an instruction, an invitation so bare it felt more like a summons. I knew then, as I had known for some time, that my presence was required not for my company, but for appearances. I arrived at Genevieve's house in Oakwood Estates, precisely at 1 o'clock. The long, curved driveway was already lined with gleaming luxury cars, their polished surfaces reflecting a sky that felt far brighter than my mood. From the backyard, a cascade of laughter spilled over the manicured hedges, a sound of effortless joy that felt alien to me. Genevieve had always been the woman I wasn't, polished, impeccably social, and possessed of an elegance that seemed as natural to her as breathing. Her house was a testament to that perfection, a sprawling colonial that looked as if it had been lifted from the pages of an architectural magazine, all white marble, soaring ceilings, and artfully placed bouquets of fresh flowers. As I walked through the side gate and onto the sprawling stone patio, I saw them. The entire party was gathered around a long rustic wooden table, shaded by a large canvas umbrella. Clara was seated right next to Genevieve, their heads bent close together as they shared a private joke, their laughter intertwining. My son-in-law, Marcus, was at a massive stainless steel grill, expertly flipping burgers, playing the role of the devoted son that Genevieve had so proudly raised him to be. "Eleanor," Genevieve called out, her smile perfectly practiced, a brilliant flash of white in her sun-kissed face. "So glad you could make it." Clara looked up, her own smile faltering for just a second, as she registered my arrival. She gave me a quick, almost imperceptible nod. "Hi, Mom. You can sit over there." She gestured vaguely with her wineglass toward an empty chair at the far end of the table, isolated from the nucleus of the conversation. I made my way to the seat, my footsteps feeling unnaturally loud on the stone. I sat down quietly, a spectator at my own family gathering, watching as everyone buzzed with conversations about things I was not a part of. Marcus's sister was there with her rambunctious children, and a few of Genevieve's friends from her bridge club, even the next-door neighbor. Everyone seemed to fit so seamlessly into this perfect picture. Everyone except for me. Then, the gift exchange began. "Oh, Genevieve, we have something special for you," Clara announced. She stood up, her entire body animated with a kind of giddy excitement I hadn't seen from her in years, not since she was a little girl on Christmas morning. Marcus appeared at her side, beaming, holding out a small, dark velvet box and a crisp envelope. Genevieve's hands flew to her mouth when she opened the box, a theatrical gasp escaping her lips. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a stunning diamond ring. It was an explosion of light, the kind of jewel that commands attention from across a room. "Oh, Clara, honey," Genevieve breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "This is far too much." "It's not too much for the woman who raised such an incredible son," Clara gushed, pulling Genevieve into a tight, lingering hug. "And there's more." The envelope held tickets for a 2-week cruise through the Mediterranean, first class all the way. At this, Genevieve actually began to cry. Real, shimmering tears rolled down her perfectly powdered cheeks, and the whole party erupted in applause while Clara beamed, soaking in the adoration. A cold, heavy stone settled in the pit of my stomach. $20,000, I calculated. At least. Probably much more. And now, Marcus said, turning toward me, his voice having lost a significant amount of its earlier enthusiasm. For Grandma Eleanor. Clara walked over, her steps lacking the bounce they'd had just moments before. She handed me a small, generic gift bag, the kind with glitter that comes off on your hand. Inside was a plastic flower, a garish pink peony of the sort you might find in a dollar store bin, and a card that looked like it had been snatched from a drugstore rack in a last-minute panic. I forced my hands to be steady as I opened it. The printed message was simple. Happy Mother's Day. Underneath, in Clara's familiar, looping script, were 3 words. Thanks for everything, Mom. Just like that. Thanks for everything. The kind of thing you say to the cashier at the grocery store. The perfunctory sign-off to a transaction. The lively chatter around the table died. The sudden silence was deafening. I could feel every eye on me, their gazes a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity, waiting to see how I would react to this casual public humiliation. Genevieve cleared her throat, a small, uncomfortable sound. Even Marcus had the decency to look embarrassed. It's lovely, I managed to say, the words feeling like sand in my mouth. My voice was a ghost, barely a whisper. Thank you, dear. But Clara had already turned away. She was already back at Genevieve's side, launching into an animated story about the cruise destinations, her voice once again full of life. The conversation moved on, swirling around me but never touching me, and I just sat there, my hands gripping a $5 plastic flower, feeling smaller and more insignificant than I had in my entire life. I stayed for another hour, a ghost at the feast, nursing a glass of iced tea I didn't want. I wore a polite, fixed smile, a mask I had perfected over a lifetime of social and professional obligation. I tried to make conversation, asking Marcus's sister about her children's school year, but she gave me only a short, distracted answer before being pulled into a more amusing story happening further down the table. Each attempt to connect was a pebble tossed into a rushing river, swallowed without a ripple. The message was clear. I was background scenery. When I finally decided I couldn't bear it a moment longer, I stood up. I should be going, I announced to no one in particular. Clara, still deep in conversation with Genevieve, barely looked up. Thanks for coming, Mom. Drive safe. There was no hug, no walk to the door, just a casual dismissal, her attention already snapping back to the woman who held her complete and utter devotion. The drive home was a painful blur. The familiar streets of my neighborhood seemed foreign, the houses and trees painted in shades of grief. I kept seeing it, a relentless film reel, playing in my mind, the brilliant flash of the diamond ring, the pure, unadulterated joy on Clara's face as she presented it, the easy reciprocal affection she shared with Genevieve. When was the last time she had looked at me that way? When was the last time she had put more than a moment's thought into anything she gave me? The questions circled and circled, a vulture of a thought with no answer to land on. I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine, but I didn't move to get out. For a long, long time, I just sat in the deafening silence of the car, staring at that ridiculous plastic flower on the passenger seat. It caught the weak glow of the dusk, its pink petals looking garish and cheap. 43 years of scraped knees, bedtime stories, school projects, and fevered nights. 43 years of being her mother, and this is what I was worth. A last-minute afterthought from the clearance aisle. That night, sleep was an impossibility. I tossed and turned in my large empty bed, the sheets tangling around me like restraints. I kept replaying the scene at the party, dissecting every word, every glance, searching for the precise moment where I had gone so wrong. I had built a successful company, Vance Advisory Group, from the ground up. I had employed dozens of people, earned awards from the Business Council, and contributed to my community. I was seen as a pillar, a success. But in the quiet darkness of my own home, I felt like an absolute failure at the one job that was supposed to matter most. I had somehow failed to be worthy of my own daughter's love. Finally, I got up and walked to my home office, the one room in the house that had always been my sanctuary of control. Here, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my life's work, financial statements, tax returns, business contracts. I felt a different kind of ache settle in. What was it all for? What good were decades of achievement if the person I did it all for saw me as nothing more than a line item in her budget? The sleepless night bled into a sleepless week. That plastic flower, which I had placed on the kitchen counter, became a monument to my pain. It taunted me with its cheerful, artificial permanence. It ate at me like a physical illness. I knew I needed answers, not the messy, emotional kind that come from tearful confrontations and dramatic accusations, but real, quantifiable answers. The kind of answers that hide in the cold, hard certainty of bank statements and old receipts. The following Saturday, I locked myself in my office and began to pull out the heavy filing cabinets I hadn't touched in years. I could almost hear Arthur's voice, teasing me. "You're such a pack rat, Eleanor. Why do you keep every single piece of paper? You never know when you might need proof." I'd always told him with a laugh. The memory was a fresh stab of pain. I never imagined the proof I'd be searching for was of my own motherhood. The first file I opened was labeled in my neat script, Clara, University. Inside was a thick stack of documents. Canceled checks for tuition payments, receipts for room and board, statements detailing dozens of smaller expenses I had long forgotten, textbooks, a new laptop when hers was stolen, even the parking tickets she'd gotten on campus that she couldn't afford to pay. I started a running tally on my calculator. The total, not even including the reliable sedan I'd bought her junior year, was a staggering $47,000. But that was just the beginning. I found the folder marked Wedding, CNM. My breath caught in my throat. I had wanted her day to be a fairy tale. $58,000 for a single perfect day. The venue, the caterer, the Vera Wang dress she'd sworn she couldn't live without, the photographer. I had insisted on paying for all of it. Marcus's parents, I remembered with a fresh sting, had contributed a single case of wine. Then came the house files. When Clara and Marcus got married, they fell in love with a home in the exclusive Oakwood Estates, a place their combined income couldn't possibly afford. So I had co-signed the mortgage. 2 years later, when Marcus's new landscaping Zendix, Greenscape Designs, hit a rough patch, I had quietly taken over the mortgage payments for 6 months, funneling the money from my own account so they would never be faced with the shame of it. They never knew. I had made absolutely sure of that. Next were the cars, 3 of them over the years. Each one had come with the same promise. "It's just a loan, Mom, until we get back on our feet." Somehow their feet never seemed to find solid ground, and those loans were never repaid. I never asked. I just quietly absorbed the cost. But it was the file marked emergency fund that truly shattered me. In 2019, Marcus's business had nearly gone under after some bad investments. Clara had called me, sobbing, hysterical, begging for help. "We're facing bankruptcy, Mom. We'll lose everything." Without a second thought, I had transferred $85,000 to their account that same day. No contracts, no discussion of repayment, just a mother saving her child. 6 months later, they bought a boat. I leaned back in my leather chair, my body trembling slightly, as I stared at the final number on the calculator's display. Over the past 15 years, I had given them nearly $400,000 in direct support for their education, their wedding, their home, their cars, and their business. And that didn't even count the countless smaller expenses I had long ago stopped tracking. Yesterday, I was handed a plastic flower. The pain that washed over me wasn't about the money. I had been fortunate. My hard work had paid off, and I had invested well over the years. I could afford to be generous. The truly painful part, the part that felt like a physical wound, was the chilling realization that my generosity had become utterly invisible to Clara. It was no longer a gift to be appreciated, but a utility to be expected, like electricity or running water. My love, my support, had been taken for granted for so long that it had simply disappeared from view. I picked up my phone, my thumb scrolling mechanically through the past year of text conversations with my daughter. It was a brutal, one-sided history. My messages were filled with questions and affection. How are you, sweetie? Thinking of you. Let me know if you need anything. Hers were almost exclusively functional, devoid of any emotional connection. Can you pick up the dry cleaning? Marcus needs to borrow your truck. The kids need new shoes for school. Always asking. Always needing. Never offering. There was never a random, "How are you doing, Mom?" or a simple, "Just thinking of you." Not once. Yet Genevieve, a woman she had known for 12 years, received diamond rings and Mediterranean cruises. The thought was a fresh stab of agony. The disparity was so stark, so cruel. Genevieve received tributes. I received invoices. A cold, methodical curiosity began to replace the heat of my anger. I opened my laptop, my fingers moving with a grim purpose. I looked up the mortgage on Clara and Marcus's house in Oakwood Estates. Of course it was still in my name. The payments were on autodraft, siphoned directly from my business account every single month, a seamless transaction I had set up years ago to avoid the awkwardness of them having to ask that business account. I pulled up the monthly statements and began to go through them, line by line, with the same meticulous attention I gave to a corporate audit. I searched for payments made to Greenscape Designs, and there they were, consistent and high. Marcus's company serviced the grounds at 3 of my commercial properties. I did a quick search for the going market rate for such contracts. My breath caught. I was paying him 30% above the highest competitive bid. It was a hidden subsidy, a quiet bonus I was giving my son-in-law under the guise of a business contract, and I'd never said a word. Next, I looked at the miscellaneous payments, the ones categorized as consulting fees, a monthly payment of $1,200 to Claire. She did some light bookkeeping for 2 of my smaller legacy clients. I knew for a fact that the work took her at most 6 hours a month. I was paying my daughter over $200 an hour for simple data entry. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of breathtaking, heartbreaking clarity. They weren't just my daughter and son-in-law, they were my dependents. They were adults in their mid-30s who had engineered their entire comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle around my silent, unending financial support. And in that moment, I finally understood the narrative they must have told themselves. I understood why I was painted as the cold, disconnected mother. It was a story born of necessity. It allowed them to see me not as a person to be loved and respected, but as a resource to be managed. They weren't taking advantage of their loving mother's kindness. They were simply drawing from the deep and personal well of a wealthy woman who, in their version of the story, was too busy and emotionally distant to notice anyway. They had been living off my generosity while casting me as the villain in their lives, the one who just didn't understand. My gaze drifted around my office, a room that had always felt like a testament to my competence. The awards from the Business Council and framed newspaper clippings seemed to mock me. I scanned the photos on the wall, me with Arthur at a charity ball, me cutting the ribbon on a new office building, but there were no recent photos of Clara and me. The last one was taken at her college graduation. We had stopped wanting to take pictures together years ago. The digital clock on my desk read 4:30 p.m. I had been in this room for 8 hours excavating the truth of my own life. And the final undeniable truth was this. I had spent years trying to buy my daughter's love, and in doing so I had only taught her that I was a source of money, not a source of affection. As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the polished wood of the desk. The screen lit up with a new text message from Clara. "Mom, Marcus's truck broke down. Can we borrow yours for a few days?" I stared at the words until they blurred. The raw, transactional nature of it, arriving at this exact moment, was almost poetic in its cruelty. Another problem to be solved. Another need to be met. My thumbs hovered over the screen, my muscles primed with years of instinct to type. "Of course, honey. The spare key is on the hook." But I couldn't. The fresh wounds of the day were too raw. After a long, shaky breath, I typed a response that was entirely new. "I'll think about it." It was the first time in years I hadn't immediately said yes. The small act of resistance felt like a tremor, the beginning of a seismic shift. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I found the number in my contacts and made the call. "Isabel Rossi, please. This is Eleanor Vance calling." On Monday morning, I sat in a plush leather chair across from Isabel Rossi. Her office was on the 32nd floor of the city's newest skyscraper, a sleek tower of glass and steel that overlooked the entire downtown core. From her panoramic window, I could see my own building, the headquarters of the Vance Advisory Group. It stood proud and solid, a brick-and-mortar testament to 3 decades of my life. It was my legacy, and I was about to burn it to the ground. Isabel, my attorney and confidant for the past 12 years, settled behind her vast mahogany desk with a cup of tea. She was a sharp, perceptive woman, whose calm demeanor belied a fierce intellect. She studied my face for a moment before speaking. "Eleanor, you look tired," she said, her voice laced with genuine concern. "What's on your mind?" I had rehearsed this conversation all weekend, playing out a dozen different versions in my head. But now, sitting there with the physical symbol of my life's work in full view, the words felt heavy, almost impossible to say. I took a deep, steadying breath. "I want to discuss selling my business." Isabel's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. Her professional composure faltered for just a second. "Vance Advisory? But, Eleanor, you've poured 30 years of your life into that company. It's you." "That's exactly the problem," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I need to understand what would happen, what the real-world consequences would be for my family if I sold it." I watched Isabel's expression shift, the friendly concern replaced by the focused, analytical mask of a lawyer. She understood this wasn't a fleeting thought or a moment of frustration. She pulled a fresh legal pad from a drawer, her movements crisp and efficient. "Walk me through your concerns," she said. Over the next hour, I laid it all out. I didn't cry or raise my voice. I spoke with the cold, dispassionate clarity of a CEO presenting a grim quarterly report. I told her about the mortgage payments, the inflated business contracts for Marcus, the vastly overpaid bookkeeping work for Clara, the entire invisible web of financial dependence I had unknowingly woven. I pushed the simple spreadsheet I had made across the desk, the one with the final, horrifying tally at the bottom. Isabel took notes, her pen scratching against the paper, the only sound in the room. She asked a few clarifying questions, but for the most part, her face remained carefully neutral. "So," she said finally, leaning back and tapping her pen on the note, "if you were to sell the business, Marcus would lose his primary commercial contracts, Clara would lose her referred bookkeeping income, and they would immediately need to qualify for their mortgage independently." "Exactly." Isabel sighed, her professional guard softening again. "Eleanor, can I ask what prompted this? Last time we spoke, just a few months ago, you were talking about expanding, maybe even grooming Clara to take on a partnership role. I told her about Mother's Day, about the stunning diamond ring, and the first-class cruise tickets for Genevieve. I told her about the $5 plastic flower and the 3-word transactional note from my own daughter. I told her about sitting at that table feeling like an ATM, with legs, a functional object whose only purpose was to dispense funds. As I spoke, I saw Isabel physically wince, a small, sharp intake of breath that she couldn't suppress. "I see," she said when I finished, her voice gentle. "I don't think you do," I replied, the words raw with a pain I could no longer hide. "I need to do this because I have to find out who my daughter really is. Right now, Isabel, I honestly don't know if she loves me or my checkbook." She nodded slowly, her gaze full of a new, sad understanding. "There are ways to do this gradually, you know. We could restructure your business arrangements over time. We could transition some of the financial support, give them a chance to adapt." "No," the word was sharp. "Absolute." I had already considered and discarded that option during my long, sleepless weekend. Gradual change gives people time to adjust. It gives them time to find new ways to manipulate the situation, new arguments, new angles of attack. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to get a real, honest answer, it needs to be clean. It needs to be final. We spent another hour discussing the logistics. Isabel had contacts in the world of business brokerage, people who specialized in consulting firms like mine. She estimated the entire process from finding a buyer to closing the sale would take 3 to 6 months. "I'll need complete confidentiality," I stated. It was a condition, not a request. No one can know about this. Not Clara, not Marcus. No one. Until the sale is finalized. Of course, Isabel agreed. But then, she leaned forward, her expression serious. But Eleanor, listen to me. Once you do this, there is no going back. The consequences will be real and immediate. Are you prepared for how Clara might react? Are you prepared for the anger, the accusations? I thought about that cheap plastic flower sitting on my kitchen counter, a constant silent reminder of my own invisibility. I thought of the years of feeling like a convenience rather than a mother. I was prepared for the truth, no matter how ugly. I met her gaze, and my voice was steady. Isabel, I'm prepared for her to show me exactly who she is. That afternoon, I began to make my first moves. Walking out of Isabel's high-rise office, I felt a strange and dizzying combination of terror and liberation. The decision was made. The gears were in motion. The world looked sharper, more defined, as if a fog had lifted. Back in the sanctuary of my home office, I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. The first thread I had to cut was the one connected to Marcus. I dialed the number for Greenscape Designs. Miss Vance. Marcus answered, his voice professionally cheerful. What can I do for you today? I kept my own voice cool and detached, the one I reserved for difficult negotiations. Marcus, I'm calling to let you know that I'll be exploring other options for my commercial properties. For budget reasons, I need to get competitive bids for the landscaping services. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I could picture his face, the confident smile faltering. Oh, he finally said. Well, okay. I wasn't aware there was an issue with our service. Mrs. Vance, we can absolutely negotiate. We can lower our rates, whatever you need. The professionalism had evaporated, replaced by a thin veneer of panic. It's not about the rates, Marcus, I said, cutting him off before he could launch into a full appeal. It's about a necessary reevaluation of all my business expenditures. It's just good practice. The words were corporate, impersonal, and wonderfully final. I was no longer his accommodating mother-in-law. I was a client who was terminating a contract. After I hung up, my heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. One thread was cut. Next, I spent an hour calling the two smaller clients, who used Clara for their bookkeeping on my recommendation. I kept the conversations brief and professional. To Miss Albright, a sweet woman in her 80s, I explained, I'm restructuring some of my legacy referral arrangements to simplify my core business operations. As such, you'll need to find a new bookkeeping service within the next 60 days. I'm happy to provide a list of excellent local accountants, if you need it. There were no personal explanations, just clean corporate maneuvering. The inevitable phone call came that evening, just as I was sitting down with a book. The caller ID flashed Clara. I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing myself. Mom? Her voice was tight, stretched thin with worry. I just spoke to Mrs. Albright. She told me the strangest thing. She said, you aren't referring bookkeepers anymore. Did I do something wrong? I felt a familiar pang, the maternal instinct to soothe and reassure her kicking in like a reflex. I took a slow, deliberate breath and smothered it. Not at all, dear, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. I'm just making some changes to simplify my business operations. Simplify. The word came out as a squeak of disbelief. Mom, what are you talking about? I need those clients. That's my income. The raw honesty of her panic was breathtaking. That's my income. Not, I enjoy the work, or I value those clients. Just the bald transactional truth. It was the confirmation I needed, and it strengthened my resolve. I am sure you will find other opportunities, Clara, I said, the words feeling both cruel and necessary. You're a very capable young woman. The compliment was a hollow shell, and we both knew. I was not offering help or a solution. I was returning her problem to her. There was a long, charged pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, quick and shallow. When she spoke again, her voice was different. The panic was edged with suspicion. Mom, is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately. Ever since Mother's Day. I'm fine, Clara, I said, the lie smooth and practiced. I'm just very busy with some business matters right now. After we hung up, the profound silence of the house rushed in to fill the space her voice had occupied. I walked into the kitchen and my eyes landed on the plastic flower, still sitting on the counter by the window. I picked it up, feeling the cheap molded stem between my fingers. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt something I had almost forgotten. It was not the vicarious power that comes from writing a check, or the fleeting satisfaction of solving someone else's problems. It was something far more potent, something that belonged only to me. It was control, the quiet, unassailable control that comes from making your own choices. In that moment, the garish flower no longer looked like an insult, it looked like a compass, and it was pointing me toward a new, unknown shore. The next few weeks fell into a quiet, intense routine. My days were filled with discreet meetings with potential buyers arranged by Isabel, sessions spent poring over financial statements, and the slow, methodical work of untangling the threads that bound my business to my daughter's lifestyle. Isabel handled the complex legal maneuvering, but I insisted on being involved in every decision. Each signature felt both like a betrayal of my past and a step toward my future. I was dismantling the life I had built, piece by piece, to see if I could build a different one from the salvage. The hardest part was the secrecy. I had never been good at keeping things from Clara, even when I probably should have. Her texts became more frequent, tinged with a confused anxiety I had to pretend not to notice. "Are you sure you're okay, Mom? You seem so distant." I would reply with careful, neutral words. "Just busy, honey. A lot going on with the company." Each lie felt like a small, necessary sin. 3 weeks into the process, I received a call from Marcus. His tone was strained, attempting a casualness that he couldn't quite pull off. "Eleanor," he began, "I was at a business council luncheon today, and I heard the strangest rumor." My heart gave a hard, painful thud against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady, even. "People gossip, Marcus. You know how it is, right?" "Right, of course," he said, a little too quickly. "But this was about you possibly selling Vance Advisory. If you were thinking of selling, you would tell us, wouldn't you? I mean, with our contracts and everything, it would obviously affect us." The question was a hook baited with a flimsy appeal to family loyalty. I refused to bite. "If and when I make any major business decisions, Marcus, you will be informed in the appropriate manner." The statement was cold, corporate, and deliberately placed a new and unfamiliar distance between us. That night, the confrontation I had been dreading arrived at my front door. The doorbell rang just after 9, long and insistent. I looked through the peephole and saw Clara standing on my porch, illuminated by the soft yellow light. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back messily, and she was wearing an old university sweatshirt I remembered from years ago, a relic from a time when our lives were simpler. "Mom, we need to talk," she said the moment I opened the door, her voice tight with resentment. She pushed past me into the living room, without waiting for an invitation, a clear violation of boundaries that felt deeply symbolic. I closed the door and turned to face her, folding my hands in my lap as I sat in my armchair. I would not let this devolve into a shouting match. "Marcus's contracts are hanging by a thread. My bookkeeping clients are gone. And now I'm hearing rumors that you're selling the business," she said, her words a torrent of accusation. "What is going on?" I looked at my daughter, this frantic, unraveling woman who was a stranger to me. "I'm reevaluating my priorities," I said calmly. "What does that even mean?" she demanded, her frustration mounting. I held her gaze, and I let the truth, the one I had been holding in my heart for weeks, finally surface. "It means I am 67 years old, Clara, and I am tired of carrying everyone else's responsibilities." Her face flushed, the anger in her eyes flickering with the first hint of guilt. Her mind immediately went to the most obvious catalyst. "Is this about Mother's Day?" she asked, her voice suddenly softer. "Is this about the gift? Look, I'm sorry if you didn't like it, but we've been really tight on money lately." A bubble of wild, hysterical laughter threatened to burst from my chest. Tight on money. The words were so absurd, so profoundly disconnected from reality, that I almost felt a sense of pity for her. tight on money while living in a house I paid for, driving cars I had bought, and working jobs I had arranged. But I smothered the sarcasm would only obscure the lesson she needed to learn. Instead, I just looked at her and said, "This isn't about one day, Clara. This is about understanding what really matters." She left 20 minutes later, more frustrated and confused than when she had arrived. She had come armed for a fight about a gift, and I had refused to engage. I had changed the rules of the game, and she didn't know how to play. I watched her from the living room window as she got into the late-model SUV I had co-signed for. I watched her drive away, back to the beautiful house in Oakwood Estates where I was, for now, still paying the mortgage. A cold, clear thought settled in my mind, but not for much longer. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning. I was in Isabel's office, the final purchase agreement spread out on the polished mahogany desk between us. She had found the perfect buyer, a prestigious national firm, looking to expand its regional presence. The offer they made was more than generous. It was a stunning validation of my life's work. My hand was hovering over the signature line, the pen feeling impossibly heavy, when my phone, sitting on the desk, began to ring. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID showed my own home number, which was strange since I was miles away. "That's odd," I murmured, picking it up. "Hello? Hello? Is this Mrs. Vance?" a man's polite voice asked. "This is Julian Croft from Croft and Sterling, trying to reach you regarding the acquisition of the Vance Advisory Group." My blood went cold. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. "I'm sorry, who is this?" I asked, my own voice sounding distant to my ears. Isabel looked up, her expression sharp with concern. "Julian Croft," he repeated patiently. "My firm is handling the due diligence for the purchase. I do apologize. I may have dialed the wrong number. I was trying to reach your office. You called my home number," I stated, my mind racing. "Ah, yes. My apology. When I called the main line, someone answered and said they were your assistant," he explained casually. "They gave me permission to discuss the details of the sale and provided this number." I closed my eyes. The office, the desk, the city skyline outside the window, everything faded away. An assistant, permission to discuss the sale. Only one person had a key to my house. Only one person would have the audacity to answer my private phone and impersonate my staff, authorizing a conversation about a multi-million-dollar confidential transaction. Clara, the sheer nerve of it, the breathtaking arrogance, left me speechless. "Thank you for calling, Mr. Croft," I said, my voice a mask of calm professionalism. "Please direct all future communications through my attorney, Isabel Rossi. Her contact information is in the file." I hung up the phone without waiting for a reply, and immediately redialed, this time calling my own house. It rang 4 times, each shrill sound scraping against my raw nerves, before it was picked up. "Mom's house. This is Clara." Her voice was bright, cheerful, and utterly false. "What are you doing in my house, Clara?" I asked. There was no preamble, no greeting, just the cold, hard question. There was a pause. I could hear the gears in her head turning, searching for a plausible lie. "Mom, I didn't expect you to call. I thought you were at some meeting. I just came by to water your plants." "I don't have any plants that need watering," I said flatly. The lie was so lazy, so insulting in its lack of effort. Another pause. This one longer, heavier. "Okay, fine," she said, her voice losing its cheerful veneer. "I was looking for something. Marcus said, you might have some old tax documents he needs for a business license renewal. And you answered my private phone line because why?" I pressed, my voice like ice. "It just kept ringing," she said, her voice faltering now. I thought it might be important. I could hear the lies crumbling, the desperation seeping through. She had been caught. "I'm coming home, Clara," I said, my voice low and final. "We need to talk." The 15-minute drive from Isabel's office to my house felt like an eternity. With every passing mile, my shock morphed into a cold, hard rage. I kept replaying the conversation with Mr. Croft, the way Clara had pretended to be my assistant, the way she had authorized him to discuss confidential business matters. This was no longer just about entitlement or taking me for granted. This was a calculated deception. It was fraud. The audacity of it was a bottomless pit. She hadn't just crossed a line, she had obliterated. When I pulled into my driveway, her SUV was parked right where she had left it the other night. My house felt violated before I even stepped inside. I walked through the door and straight to my home office. And there, she was sitting in my chair at my desk, with my private papers scattered around her. Purchase agreements, financial statements, confidentiality documents, everything she had no right to see. She looked up when I walked in, her face a tangled mess of defiance and guilt. "Find what you were looking for?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She gestured weakly to the documents spread across my desk, her defiance already crumbling into a desperate attempt to shift the blame. "Mom, what is this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You're really selling the company." I walked over to the desk and began to gather the papers, my movements slow and deliberate. I stacked the purchase agreements and financial statements into a neat pile, reclaiming my property, my privacy, and my power all at once. "These," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "are private business matters." "Private?" The word erupted from her, a mix of disbelief and indignation. "Private? Mom, this affects all of us. Marcus's business depends on your contracts. My entire income comes from your referral. You can't just sell the company without talking to us first." I stopped collecting the papers and truly looked at her. She was 35 years old, a grown woman, a wife and mother, sitting in my chair, at my desk, demanding an explanation for decisions I made about my own life's work. The sheer, unmitigated entitlement of it was a physical blow. When had I allowed this to happen? When had she come to believe that my life was merely a subsidiary of her own? "Actually, Clara," I said, my voice level and cold, "I can sell my business without consulting anyone. It's my company. I built it. It is mine." Her face flushed and her eyes glistened with the first sign of tears. Her argument had been dismantled with a simple statement of fact. She shifted tactics, reaching for the one weapon she had left. "But what about us?" she pleaded. "What about our family?" I repeated the question, letting it hang in the air between us. "What about our family, Clara?" An interesting question. When exactly did you start caring so deeply about our family? The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, a sound from a normal world that felt a million miles away. When Clara spoke again, her voice was smaller, stripped of its earlier aggression. "Mom, if you're upset about Mother's Day, I already apologize. We can do something special next year. I promise." "Next year?" I said quietly, a sad, bitter smile touching my lips. "Like the year after that, and the year after that. It's always next year when it comes to treating me with basic respect, isn't it?" I walked around the desk and sat down in the visitor's chair, the one my clients used to sit in. I was now the visitor in my own office, facing my daughter who sat enthroned in my seat of power. "Do you have any idea," I asked, my voice still quiet, "how much money I have given you and Marcus over the years?" She shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping to the scattered papers. "We never asked you to keep track." "Oh, but I have," I said. $400,000, Clara. $400,000. And that number doesn't include the mortgage I am still paying on your house, or the inflated business contracts I've arranged for Marcus, or the overpaid referrals that provide your entire income." Her mouth opened, then closed. The color drained from her face. She had clearly never considered the sum of her requests, never imagined that I would have the actual numbers. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty," I continued, my voice softening with a sad, surgical precision. "I'm telling you this because I need you for once to understand something fundamental. I have been subsidizing your entire adult life, and somehow, along the way, you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a resource." "That's not true," she whispered. But the denial was weak, reflexive. "Isn't it?" I challenged her. "Then answer me this. When was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for something, not to solve a problem, just to see how I was. When was the last time you asked how I was really doing? How I was handling the anniversary of your father's death? whether I ever got lonely in this big empty house. She couldn't answer. Her face began to crumple, the carefully constructed facade of the aggrieved daughter collapsing under the weight of those simple, unanswerable questions. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a dawning horror, as if seeing the truth of our relationship for the very first time. When the tears finally came, they were not the theatrical tears of her past manipulations. They were silent, broken sobs, the kind that come from a place of genuine shock and pain. Her face, which had been a mask of defiance and confusion, had completely crumbled. When you gave Genevieve a $20,000 ring and a cruise and I received a plastic flower, I continued, my voice softer now, but no less firm. It was never about the money, Clara. It was about the thought. It was about the care. It was about the consideration. You spent weeks, maybe months, planning her gift. You thought about what she would love, what would make her feel special. What you gave me was an afterthought you grabbed on the way to the party. The tears flowed faster down her cheeks, but I couldn't stop. The words had been dammed up inside me for years, and now the dam had broken. You treat Genevieve like family because she doesn't owe you anything, and you don't owe her anything but respect. You have to earn her affection. You have to be charming, and thoughtful, and present. But me, I said, and my voice cracked with the weight of the truth. I'm just Mom. I'm the one who is expected to provide, to support, to enable your lifestyle without ever asking for anything in return. My love was a guarantee, so you treated it as if it had no value. I love you, Mom, she whispered through her tears, the words barely audible. I looked at her, at my daughter, and my heart ached with the question I had to ask. Do you? I asked gently. Or do you love what I can do for you? Do you love me? Or do you love the safety net I provide? She couldn't answer. She could only stare at me, her mouth slightly open, the devastating question hanging in the air between us, because we both knew the honest answer. Just then, my phone, still on the desk, rang again, its cheerful tone a violent intrusion into the heavy silence. The screen lit up with Marcus's name. Don't answer it, Clara said quickly, a new wave of panic in her eyes. I ignored her. I reached over and picked up the phone, hitting the speaker button so she could hear every word. Hello, Marcus? Eleanor. His voice was strained, attempting a tone of familial authority. Clara told me about the sale. We need to talk about this as a family. This decision affects all of us. Actually, Marcus, it doesn't, I said. My voice is crisp and clear as a winter morning. It affects me. It is my business, and it is my decision to sell it. But our contracts, our livelihood. Your livelihood, I said, my voice hardening, has been my responsibility for far too long. It is time for you and your wife to finally take care of yourself. I hung up the phone and looked at Clara. She was staring at me as if she had never seen me before, her expression one of utter shell-shocked disbelief. She had just witnessed her mother, the woman who had always been her safety net, her fixer, her ever-reliable resource, calmly and completely dismantle the foundations of her entire world. Mom, she whispered, shaking her head slowly. You can't be serious about this. I looked into the eyes of my daughter, the child I loved more than life itself, and I knew I was doing the hardest, most loving thing I had ever done. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. And that is when the real panic began. The next morning, the assault began. My phone started ringing at precisely 6:47 a.m. The shrill sound slicing through the quiet dawn. Clara's name flashed on the screen. I looked at it, took a sip of my freshly brewed coffee, and let it go to voicemail. A moment later it rang again, and then again. By the time I had finished my coffee and a piece of toast, she had called 12 times. On the 13th call I decided to answer. Mom, please, she began immediately, her voice frantic and raw from crying. Please, we need to talk about this. We talked yesterday, Clara, I said calmly, carrying my cup to the sink. I believe I was quite clear. Clear, she practically shrieked. You can't just destroy our lives because you're upset about a Mother's Day gift. A familiar flame of anger licked at my resolve, but I kept my voice even. I told you yesterday this has nothing to do with one gift, and you know it. Then what? She cried. her voice breaking with desperation. "What do you want from me?" "An apology. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." "What do I have to do?" "I want you to understand that I am not your personal ATM," I said, the words sharp and clean. "I want you to see me as a person, not as a source of funding. I want you to treat me like your mother." "I do see you as a person." "You're my mother," she insisted. "Then when was the last time you acted like it?" I countered. The line went silent, the question hanging between us, unanswerable. Finally, she abandoned the emotional appeal and reverted to the practical terror that was truly driving her. "Mom," she said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper, "if you sell the business, we'll lose everything. The house, Marcus's contracts, my clients. We'll have to start over from nothing." "Yes," I said, the single word landing with the force of a gavel. "You will, and maybe that is exactly what you need." She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again, then again, and again. I stopped counting after the 15th call. Each time she would leave a frantic, pleading voicemail, and I listened to them with a kind of clinical detachment. She was cycling through every manipulative tactic she had ever learned, every tool in her arsenal. The voicemails became a study in desperation. First came the bargaining. "Mom, please call me back. We can work this out, I promise. I'll make it up to you. We can go away for a weekend. Just, whatever you want. Just please don't do this." Then came the guilt trips. "Mom, Marcus is having chest pains. He thinks he's having a heart attack from all the stress. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason he ends up in the hospital?" Then, the appeal to my pride and public image. "Mom, everyone is going to think you're being vindictive and cruel. Your friends, your business associates. Is that really how you want people to remember you? As the mother who destroyed her own daughter's life over a grudge." By noon, she had called 28 times. I knew the exact number because I had started keeping a tally on a notepad next to the phone. Each tick mark was a small testament to her mounting panic. With every unanswered call, with every desperate message, she was being forced to confront the truth I had laid out for her. Her entire life, the beautiful house, the successful husband, the comfortable existence. It was all a fragile house of cards built on the foundation of my generosity. And I was tired of being taken for granted. I was done enabling a life she was not willing to earn for herself. I had simply decided to stop holding it all up. The doorbell rang at 2:30 in the afternoon. It wasn't the frantic, insistent ringing of a panic, but a single determined press. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was them. Clara stood on the porch, her eyes red and swollen, her face pale. Beside her stood Marcus, his jaw tight, his arms crossed over his chest in a posture of barely controlled anger. The cavalry had arrived. I opened the door but did not move from the threshold, blocking their entry. This was my home, and they were no longer welcome inside. "Mom, please," Clara began immediately, her voice raw. "We need to talk about this like adults." A cold, sharp laugh almost escaped me. "We tried that yesterday, Clara. You weren't interested in talking like an adult. You were interested in accessing my private documents and pretending to be my assistant to my business broker." The direct hit landed. Clara flinched, and even Marcus had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. He was the one who stepped forward, attempting to reclaim the moral high ground. "Mrs. Vance, with all due respect, this is affecting more than just you. We have a family to think about." "So do I, Marcus," I said quietly, my gaze unwavering. "I have to think about what's best for my family. And right now, what's best is for both of you to finally learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. Clara's face crumpled completely. "Mom, I'm begging you," she cried, fat tears beginning to roll down her cheeks again. "Please don't do this to us." "Begging me now?" I asked, the question laced with years of accumulated pain. "When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me to dinner when it wasn't a holiday obligation? When was the last time you asked me to say you love me, without needing something 5 minutes later?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence was her confession, just as it had been the day before. "I thought so," I said, my voice hardened. "You only call when you need something. You only visit when you want something. You only start to care when you're about to lose something. That was when Marcus's anger finally erupted. This is ridiculous, he snapped, his face reddened. You're punishing us for being successful, for building a good life together. This time, I did laugh. It was a short, bitter, humorless sound. Successful? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. Marcus, you are 37 years old and you have never, not once, made a mortgage payment on the house you live in. Your wife's entire income comes from charity work I arranged for her. You call that successful? We call it family, Clara said. Her voice broke. Families are supposed to help each other. Help goes both ways, Clara, I countered, my voice softening slightly. What have you done to help me? When have you ever contributed anything to this family besides taking from it? The question hung in the humid afternoon air like a judgment. She looked at Marcus, then back at me, her mind frantically searching for an answer that didn't exist. I gave you grandchildren, she said finally, the words a desperate last-ditch defense. The cruelty of her statement, using her own children as a bargaining chip, was the final straw. No, Clara, you didn't, I said, my voice turning to ice. You gave yourself children. Then you moved 3 states away and you visit twice a year on major holidays. I haven't seen Leo and Mia in 8 months. So don't you dare try to use my grandchildren against me. Her face went bone white. Even Marcus looked deeply uncomfortable, his gaze falling to the welcome mat at my feet. The truth was brutal, and it had finally silenced them both. You want to know what family looks like, Clara? I continued, my voice resonating with a strength I didn't know I possessed. Genevieve's family calls her every week, just to talk. They visit her without being asked. They remember her birthday without a reminder from their phone. They give her thoughtful gifts because they actually pay attention to who she is and what she likes. That is why she gets the ring and the cruise. Not because she is owed it, but because she is loved in a way that is active and present. She is treated like she matters. Clara was crying openly now, deep, shuddering sobs. But I couldn't stop. Decades of buried hurt were pouring out of me, a flood of truth that washed away all pretense. I spent 30 years of my life building a business from nothing, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I did it so I could provide for you. I wanted to give you security, opportunities, a better life than the one I had. But somewhere along the way you stopped appreciating what I gave you and started expecting it. You stopped seeing me as a person, and you started seeing me as a function, a resource. Mom, please, she whispered, her voice a raw plea. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I promise. I'll be better. I looked at her, and I felt a profound sadness. It was the right thing to say, but it was being said for the wrong reason. You're sorry because you're scared, I said gently. You're not sorry because you understand what you did wrong. You're sorry because your safety net is on fire. Marcus had heard enough. He saw the futility of the situation. Come on, Clara, he said, grabbing her arm. We're wasting our time here. She's made up her mind. But for the first time, Clara pulled away from him. She shook her head, her gaze fixed on me, and in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. The anger was gone. The panic was gone. It was replaced by a look of raw, genuine vulnerability. Mom, she asked, her voice quiet and clear. What do you want from me? Tell me what I need to do to fix this. She was finally asking the right question. My heart ached, but it was far, far too late for that. I want you to figure out who you are without my money, I said, spelling out the impossible terms. I want you to learn how to value relationships that aren't transactional. I want you to understand, deep in your bones, that love isn't about what someone can give you. Her eyes widened, searching my face for a loophole, for a sign of negotiation. And then what? She asked. If I do all of that, will you change your mind? I shook my head slowly, a deep sadness settling over me. Oh, Clara, I'm not selling the business to punish you. I'm selling it to free myself. I am 67 years old, and I want to spend whatever time I have left finding out what my own life looks like when I'm not responsible for everyone else's choices. I stepped back and began to close the door. Mom, wait, she cried out, her voice cracking. I love you. I really do love you. I paused, my hand on the doorknob, the words hitting a place deep inside me that still ached. I looked at her one last time. I love you too, Clara, I said. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. That's why I'm doing this. Then I closed the door, shutting out the sight of her stricken face. I leaned against the solid wood and listened as she cried on my porch for 10 long minutes, before I finally heard their car door slam and the engine start, the sound fading into the distance, leaving me in the echoing silence of my own home. The sale of the Vance Advisory Group was finalized 2 weeks later, the day I signed the last document in Isabel's office. There was no fanfare, no champagne, just a quiet, somber handshake and the heavy weight of a 30-year chapter of my life closing forever. The silence from Clara was absolute. She didn't call, she didn't text. It was as if she had fallen off the face of the earth. 3 months after that day, I was sitting on the porch of my new cottage, watching the sunset paint the surface of the lake in fiery shades of gold and pink. The house was smaller, cozier, a simple wooden structure nestled in a grove of pine trees. I had left the sprawling empty house in the city behind, and with it all the memories of failed expectations and rooms that echoed with disappointment. The move had been surprisingly easy, a shedding of a skin I had outgrown. 30 years of business files, contracts, and correspondence were boxed up and put into long-term storage. I kept only the things that truly mattered, a few cherished photos of Arthur, his favorite worn-out books, and the hand-stitched quilt my own mother had made for me when Clara was born. The cottage came lightly furnished, which suited me perfectly. I had no desire to drag the heavy ghost-filled furniture of my past into this new life. The previous owners had left behind a garden bed full of weeds, and I had discovered a peace in tending to it, in coaxing new life from the soil with my own 2 hands. I'd never had time for gardening before, but now, I had nothing but time. Clara hadn't called in 6 weeks. The silence was a constant, dull ache in a corner of my heart, but it also brought a strange and unfamiliar clarity. For so many years I had measured my worth by her approval, her visits, her needs. Now, I was learning to measure it by the quiet rhythm of my own peace of mind. The sale had provided more than enough for a comfortable retirement. I had Isabel set up an irrevocable trust for Leo and Mia, money for their education that they would receive directly when they turned 18, with no strings attached and absolutely no parental access. It was my way of ensuring they would have opportunities, without enabling their parents. In a final act of severance, I had also quietly paid off the remaining mortgage on Clara and Marcus's house. They now owned their home, free, and it was the last check I would ever write for them, a final closing of the ledger. They would never receive another penny from me. My phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and smiled. It was Beatrice, my neighbor from across the lake. We had become fast friends over the past month, bonding over morning walks with her beagle and sharing glasses of wine on our respective docks in the evenings. "Eleanor, are you free for dinner tomorrow night?" she asked, her voice warm and cheerful. "My son and his wife are visiting for the weekend, and I'd love for you to finally meet them." "I'd like that very much, Beatrice," I said, and I was surprised by how much I meant it. Susan's relationship with her children was everything mine had never been: natural, easy, and reciprocal, built on a foundation of genuine affection rather than obligation and need. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked down to the small wooden dock. The water was still, a perfect mirror reflecting the last light of day. A family of ducks paddled by, the ducklings following their mother in a perfect trusting line. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a text message. For a foolish, hopeful moment, my heart leaped, thinking it might be Clara. But it was from Isabel. "Thought you'd want to know. Greenscape Designs filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Clara is looking for work as a teacher's aide at the elementary school. How are you doing?" I stared at the message for a long time, the words glowing in the deepening twilight. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me, a quiet grief for the life they had lost. But underneath it, there was no guilt. They were adults. They had made their choices. Now, like everyone else in the world, they were learning to live with the consequences. I typed out my response, my fingers steady. "I'm doing well, thank you for letting me know. A loon called out across the water, its haunting cry echoing off the silent hills. It was a sound I'd never heard before, moving here. There were a lot of things I was experiencing for the first time, now that I was no longer busy being responsible for everyone else's life. It was enough. It was more than enough. 6 more months passed. The fiery autumn colors of the lake gave way to the quiet, stark beauty of winter. I had settled into the rhythm of my new life. My pottery skills were slowly improving. My shelves now held a collection of charmingly lopsided bowls, and my book club had become a source of lively debate and warm friendship. I had found a quiet contentment that felt more real and durable than any happiness I had known before. Then the letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday, tucked in with a seed catalog and a bill. It was a simple, cream-colored envelope. The return address was Clara's, but the handwriting was different. The familiar, looping script I knew so well was gone, replaced by something more careful, more deliberate, as if each letter had been formed with conscious effort. My heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm. I sat on my porch, the cold winter air sharp on my cheeks, and hesitated for a long time before sliding my finger under the seal. Dear Mom, I have tried to write this letter 100 times over the past few months, but I never knew what to say. For a long time, all I wanted to do was ask you to fix things, to make everything go back to the way it was before. But I finally understand that the way things were before wasn't good for any of us. It was easy, but it wasn't honest. I'm not sure if you've heard, but Marcus and I are getting divorced. The bankruptcy, losing the house, all of it. It broke something between us that was already fragile. It turns out our marriage was built on the same foundation as everything else in our lives, your money. When that disappeared, we discovered we didn't have much left. This has been the hardest year of my life, but it has also been the most real. I had to learn who I was when I wasn't someone's wife or your daughter. I had to learn how to take care of myself, how to stand on my own. I got a full-time job at the school. It doesn't pay much, but it's mine. The pride I feel receiving that small paycheck is something I have never felt before. I am not writing to ask you for anything. I am writing to say I am sorry. I'm sorry for taking you for granted every single day for years. I am sorry for treating you like an obligation instead of a person who deserved my time and my love. I'm sorry for all the years I wasted being angry at you for not being the mother I thought I wanted, when the truth is, I wasn't being the daughter you deserve. I understand now why you sold the business. You weren't punishing me, you were freeing both of us. I just wish with all my heart that it hadn't taken me this long to see it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I am not asking you to. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to tell me. Family isn't about what you can get from someone. It's about showing up, paying attention, and caring for them simply because of who they are. I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope you found the peace you were looking for. You deserve it. Love, Clara. P.S. I still have the plastic flower. It sits on my kitchen windowsill. Every time I look at it, I remember the look on your face that day on the patio. I remember the exact moment I realized I had broken your heart. I am so sorry it took me so long to finally care about fixing it. I sat on my porch for a long time after reading the letter, the paper trembling in my hands as I watched my own breath plume in the cold air. Tears I didn't know were there began to trace hot paths down my cheek. They were not tears of sadness, but of a quiet, painful, and profound release. That evening, I went inside and wrote a response. Dear Clara, I began, thank you for your letter. It means more to me than you will ever know, but I didn't mail it that day, or the next, or the day after that. Some wounds I now understood need time and clean air to heal completely before they can be touched again, no matter how gentle the touch. Some relationships need a long season of space before they can be rebuilt on a new foundation of truth, instead of a lifetime of obligation. Maybe someday, we would find our way back to each other. Maybe we would sit on this porch together. Two different women, talk about the weather, and books, and the simple passage of time. But for now, I was content to be free. Free from guilt. free from manipulation, free from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to buy a love that should have been given freely all along. I was 67 years old, and for the first time in decades, I was living my own life, on my own terms. Eleanor's journey is a powerful and emotional lesson in self-respect and the profound courage it takes to set boundaries. It teaches us that true love and appreciation cannot be bought, and that unchecked generosity can unintentionally make us invisible to those we hold most dear. Feeling more like a bank than a mother, she took a drastic step, not born of revenge, but of a desperate need for liberation. It was her final heartbreaking attempt to force her daughter to see her as a person, not a provider, and ultimately to reclaim her own life. This story is a testament to the idea that sometimes letting go is the only path to finding out if a relationship is real, and more importantly, the only way to find true peace within yourself. If compelling stories like this resonate with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what allows us to continue bringing these powerful narratives to life. We are always amazed to see how far our stories travel, so please let us know what region or country you are watching from in the comments below.